Hello everyone. As it was mentioned, the topic of my presentation is Marriage is Not Required, Ukrainian Wonder Tales and Customary Law. And today I'm going to concentrate on a very Ukrainian tale, the Mare's Head or Kobylяча Голова. The tale is wide known in Ukraine and its versions can be encountered until nowadays. According to the Arne Thompson Author Index, it can be defined as ATU 480 tale type. And this tale type was formerly known as Frau Holle or the spinning woman by the well. But later, in 1958, it was renamed by Warren E. Roberts to The Kind and the Unkind Girls. So nowadays we know it under this title. The tale type has its subtypes, and depending on local versions, it can be referred to one or another subtype. It's also necessary to mention that the tale about the kind and the unkind girl is one of the most widespread tale types. You can see this tale all around the world in different variations. For example, in Poland, the girl is sent to pick up berries in the snow or fall down into the well. In Estonia, an orphan girl goes to a community sauna in the late evening, meet devil there, and he tried to woo her for his son. However, today I'm going to talk about Ukrainian variants of the tale, which can be defined as 480D subtype. And to make you familiar with Ukrainian specifics of this tale type, I'll briefly retell it. So there was an old man and there was an old woman. The old man had a daughter and the old woman had a daughter. The girls used to go to the evening gatherings, the Chornitsa or Dosvitki, to spin. The old woman's daughter was lazy, whereas the old man's daughter was industrious. The old woman hated her stepdaughter because she thought she was lazy. And the sister stole spinning from the old man's daughter and claimed to her mother that she did nothing. The old woman ordered or commanded the husband to send his daughter somewhere to seek service. So he took his daughter to the forest and left her there in the hut to prepare food. He himself went back home, but left an axe tied so that when the wind blew, it bent, making a chopping sound. So the girl was cooking and waiting for her father, while all of a sudden something was knocking and rumbling. That is, the Mare's head was running. Girl, girl, open the door. She did. Then the Mare's head demanded the girl to carry her over the threshold, to feed her, carry her to bed, wash her, comb her hair, and so on. Then she asks, girl, girl, look or get into my left ear and get out from the right one. The girl did, and there she got different goods from inside the Mare's head, such as gold, money, jewelry, necklace, clothing, horses, a cart, or servants. So the old woman saw that the stepdaughter was rich and got angry and envious. She asked her husband to take her own daughter to the same place. But she behaved rudely and refused to help the Mare's head, and that's why the bad girl was eaten and only bones remained after her. And in some variant, the dog announced the bad girl's death and the well-being of the good girl. Now, when the plot of the Ukrainian variants is revealed, we can move to the core of the paper. And today we'll talk about what is customary law and its specific in Ukraine of the 19th century. We'll discuss some theoretical points of feminist approach to female tales. I will give a brief historical overview of women's position in society, in Ukrainian society, as well as we'll briefly describe the right to own property, types of legacy and property in Ukrainian customary law, and finally property conflicts in the tale, as well as I will touch upon the concept of the beauty. So, since the paper deals with customary law, it is necessary to define the term. There are lots of definitions, both general and particular culture-centered, but in this paper I use the term customary law in the meaning of the system of rules based on both official law and customs that were formed and applied by folks in most of the cases, especially when the official legal system did not coincide with what people thought was fair. And those of you who are interested more, in customary law, and its definition can have a look at the work of Marina Hrimach. So Ukrainian customary law developed under the influence of the ancient law of Kiev and Rus, and the state of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and the digest of laws of the Russian Empire from 1835. The last, Marina Hrimach asserts, in 1843, put the responsibility of solving private peasants' property conflicts onto the custom. She also states that social relationships in a peasant society were mostly regulated by customary traditions adapted to the law, but sometimes openly ignoring it. And that is so because Ukrainians did not have their own independent state, and the legislation of the countries that ruled Ukrainian territory did not consider the specifics of Ukrainian customs and domestic economy. Therefore, the Ukrainian peasantry went to court only in exceptional cases, whereas most of civil cases were solved among the peasants according to their own customary law. So, but why do we need customary law while talking about wonder tales? And here we should talk a bit on the nature of female wonder tales and feministic approach to it. And before shifting to it, I will say that I use the term wonder tales as a synonym to fairy tales or tales of magic. Just the difference is that we don't have fairies in Ukraine. That's why, let's say, it's unfair to call it fairy tales, as well as not all the tales are about magic, but rather about wonders. So that's why they are wonder tales. So it's one of the most widespread international tales. The tale about the kind and the unkind girls has been interpreted from a range of different perspectives. As with other female tales, it has been examined in light of the process of maturation. It is typically assumed that the girls are at the age of pubertal transition, that is, since they do not come back home with husbands, the tale is concentrated on the preliminary phase of coming of age. Therefore, such terms as developing sexuality, maturation, and initiation seems to be intrinsic to a description of this tale type in contemporary folkloristics. At the same time, feminist discourse about wonder tales or fairy tales concentrates on the origin of the tests the heroine must pass, and on what can be considered as patriarchal ideals of femininity, speaking with Christina Bachilega term. To achieve a reward, the girl needs to accomplish different domestic tasks that will prepare her for and incorporate her into her new social status as a married woman. Stephen Swan-Jones described domestic tasks as socialization that is considered by patriarchal society to be appropriate for a woman. However, the value and meaning of customs should be considered too. Thus, what if the necessity to perform domestic tasks is not limited to womanhood and what are called women's duties, but is something that brings money and property to the girl or woman? This is especially relevant if one considers that domestic jobs did not serve as a source of discrimination against women in pre-industrial societies, but only once the position between the domestic and market sphere appeared. My assumption about the ambiguous meaning and purpose of women's duties in folk tales is also supported by the social reality of the 19th century, when there was a lack of land plots and when the idea of individual property appeared among the Ukrainian peasantry, making unmarried youth of both sexes seek work outside the home. In Ukraine, as in most other countries, there was gender segregation of work in the 19th century. However, according to Ukrainian customary law, women had the right to income from the household they ruled, as Chubinsky asserts. Consequently, the domestic task that the girl is supposed to perform in the tale may mirror some folk legal customs. Moreover, if one considers that the kind and the unkind girl's tale mirrors both psychological and social processes, it is necessary to consider local customs that affect the meaning of gender and define its patterns. Another question that I'm going to raise in this paper is the main goal of the tale, what a girl seeking. So Hedda Jason identifies material goods as the final purpose in this kind of tale. so-called reward and punishment subgenre. She also assumes that this precise tale type about the good and about the kind and the unkind girl isn't or wasn't an independent story plot. It was a continuation of another one, and that getting property as a reward is secondary, and first of all, it was loveliness as a reward. In contrast, Ben Holbeck defines this tale type as a children's fairy tale. According to his model, when there is no marriage, the heroines do not represent social and sexual opposition. And such a model is based on marriage, but does not consider an essential question raised by Linda Deck of whether there is any specific repertoire for female audience that serve their particular purposes. Property might be among their needs as well, serving as a means to a profitable marriage ahead of beauty itself. In social reality of the Ukrainian peasantry up to the beginning of 20th century, property matters and well-being in the form of a dowry, I propose, played an essential role in the female story repertoire and in a precise tale type in particular. And thus, for example, Ukrainian fairy tale scholar Roman Volkov, in his research, defines the kind girl's reward as the dowry and asserts that the stepmother then sends her own daughter, expecting that she will come back with a rich dowry too. So consequently, social conflict related to the dowry looks reasonable in the context of this tale. And considering the social and gender context as a vital part of this tale, the current study is an examination of the role of customary law in Ukrainian variants of the kind and the unkind girl. Although Ukrainian customary law has been diligently studied by scholars, little research has been done to apply it to the interpretation of Ukrainian female tales. And bearing these points in mind, I'll refer to 4 key points in the tale. The first one is the fact that girls visit evening social gathering to spin, as it was mentioned in the very beginning of the tale. The second one is the fact that the good girl or old man daughter was sent away, or in some variants she was sent away to seek service. Another point is the nature of the task, and the last one, the nature of the reward. So the first point is about the attendance of evening gatherings by girls. What does it mean for the tale? Evening gatherings, or how it was called in Ukraine, večernici or dosvitki, is a social institution of the youth of marital age that started in the middle of the autumn and had been lasting during the cold season. Girls and boys of up to married age gathered at a house, often that of a widow, who looked after them and controlled the situation. Girls went there to spin, and when the boys visited, there could be music and dancing. It was a common youth institution all over Ukraine that provided communication before marriage, and for the girls allowed to prepare in their trousseau. The work among the other girls was the mere purpose of going to večernici, since mothers sometimes established the precise amount of spinning that should have been done, as Oksana Kis asserts. Consequently, both of the girls in the tale take part in večernici because they are of marriageable age and should prepare themselves for this transition. Hence, 2 main functions of večernici can be derived. And the first one is premarital communication and search for a spouse. And the second one is work in a group. And here it's necessary to highlight 2 crucial points. The first one is premarital communication that plays a role in a girl's popularity among the opposite sex. In this kind of communication, girls' beauty does matter. And the second point is for girls, evening gathering played an important role as an opportunity to work, to spin, in order to prepare their trousseau. Marriageable capability depended on how decent the trousseau was. The proper trousseau got higher credibility than the beauty itself, because even though Ukrainian girl had a right to choose a spouse herself and the right to get married by her own will, was guaranteed by Lithuanian statute, first, second, and the third, still Ukrainian custom presupposed children's obedience, especially when it goes to the choice of spouse. This means that despite astonishing beauty, a girl might have been deprived of the matchmakers from her beloved one if his family thought she was not a worthy spouse for their son. Otherwise, he would have been deprived of his own endowment. From this, I can conclude that girls in the tale, being of marriageable age, are preparing for the transition to a marital status, and they are obligated to prepare a decent trousseau to gain a profitable mate. That's the condition that was discussed in the introductory part of the tale. Also, speaking about evening gatherings and decent trousseau, we should pay attention to such a custom as preparing the chest. So according to Ukrainian customary law, each girl should have a chest or skrynia prepared in order to get married. The skrynia, although skrynia consisted of two parts, it wasn't two different or separate containers, it was just one, but with different group of items. So skrynia is prepared for each of the daughters separately. The trousseau chest, consists of two parts, the skrynia and the chudoba, which consists outwear. The clothes, shawls, embroidered towels, different kinds of tablecloths, carpets, rugs, bed sheets, pillows, stocking, plachte, and scarves are added to the skrynia, whereas outerwear, suits, and boots are added to chudoba. So spinning was considered an appropriate female activity at evening gatherings because one should prepare enough yarn for weaving and sewing textile products later. However, the chest should also contain many other items that are not the girl's responsibility. The father may help to prepare the chest with money, but primarily it is the mother's duty. For example, as Chubinsky describes, one may ask the father, "Is the chest good?" And he answers, "Ask my wife," or "She may not have prepared it even." So this leads us to property rights, according to which the woman is not only responsible for her part of the household work, but she also has a legal right to own the money from her work. A woman can use this to buy whatever she wants and prepare a chest from her daughter, as Chubinsky describes in his work. And this was a legal and recognized source of earning money for women. From this perspective, job segregation assists income and legacy division as well. This is the reason why I question the household task as a constituent of womanhood and the patriarchal point of view only. And from this angle, the purpose of household tasks in the female tale, as mentioned in the beginning, is to symbolize the material side of all custom. In this particular tale, the problem is that the good girl or the kind girl doesn't have a mother, meaning that there is no one to take care of the chest, on the top of which her sister steals her spinning all the time. So, it means that she cannot prepare her trousseau herself. Hence, her chance of a prosperous spouse are reduced. Moreover, the good girl's stepmother wants to get rid of her for different reasons. So the second point is to being sent away, or the command to send the girl to seek service. Almost all the variants I've analyzed include the stepmother's hatred at the beginning of the story. In most of the variants, the conflict starts with the stepmother's daughter who is lazy and always tries to cheat the other girl, although sometimes stepmother's attitude towards her stepdaughter is recognized earlier. The reason for the journey is clearly indicated right in the tale. Take her somewhere or send her to seek service wherever, but do not let her stay at home. She should not eat bread idly. Therefore, I consider that the stepmother's hatred serves as a real motivation for the journey. Otherwise, the girl could easily stay home. And on the contrary, in Ukrainian male tales, when the hero is depicted as a layabout, no specific situation is described. It is only said that he does nothing while other boys of his age help their parents. Meanwhile, in this situation, in this precise tale, there is a precise occasion which describes laziness of both girls. Means the fact that they visit večernice or dosvitki, these evening gatherings, because this is the outcome of girls' work, and the outcome of the girls' work at the evening gatherings has a specific effect, as I described below as I described above, the possibility to find a profitable spouse. However, distancing from the fact of being sent away or the order to go out to seek service, there is another custom also being mentioned. In the 19th century, it was a common situation for youth to go seek service somewhere aside to earn for their future separate life. Moreover, the earned money and goods were considered as their individual property. Individually earned income was added to their endowment or trousseau. Thus, a trousseau for girls was a complex endowment, which included matrilineal inheritance or so-called materyzna, legacy endowment by the parents in general, and the individual income, if any. If one considers that working aside before marriage to earn more money for adult life, then the reward the girl gets from the marriage head for accomplishing tasks can be treated as a mere reflection of a common social situation. There is also one more point to mention here, that we see the situation that the stepmother, she has a right to command to send her stepdaughter away from home. And this is another point of customary law, according to which aging woman or elder woman has a full right to distribute food inside the family, segregate the job and goods in the family, and she's also responsible for socializing the youth. And the age gives her particular economic power up to sending young people away from home. That is exactly what we see in the tale when the stepmother orders the girl away from home. And this brings us to the question of tasks that girls should accomplish. Being hired somewhere to service, girls supposed to help in a household doing what has been defined as a patriarchal view on femininity. Describing Russian variants of at the U480 tale type, Yelena Lotovinova defines the same kind of tasks as in the Mary's Head tale as female's job. However, if one follows John Huber's theory of gender stratification that depends on the economic benefit of the family from one or another kind of job the gender do, especially females, it becomes obvious that accomplishing female's task or job in the tale, the girl is not only represented as an industrious and polite, but also as the one who works and gets paid for the job. It can be also seen from the some tale variants where the girl meets a young woman with huge teeth who asks the girl whether she wants to be on a service for a year. So let's say it's clearly indicated in the variant that from time to, in some variants, she is literally hired. They ask her to perform service for some certain amount of time. And what can be seen here is that although there is no direct rivalry between the girls for a husband, a profitable spouse is still implied because the girls are of marriageable age and their marriageable period, so to speak, marriage season was quite short from the middle of autumn until almost Lent, and it was crucial for girls. And one who did not marry during the marriage season was in danger of getting married just to anybody to avoid staying alone. And one who remained unmarried over the traditional age of, let's say, 16, 18 years old for girls, had fewer chances of marrying at all. Thus, social conflict in the tale is boosted by the marriageable age of the girls, which first of all presupposes marital matters of legacy and dowry. And I need to say that there were a few kinds of legacy. So first of all, there was no inheritance in the sense of children inheriting property after their parents' death. Instead, there was endowment, or so to call riddle. Each of the children was endowed with part of the property one by one, especially with a plot of land once they started a family, while the youngest one stayed with the parents until their demise and received their house and the rest of the property. No subsequent property claims could be made. Endowment for girls, I will call dowry. And dowry in the sense used here is the legacy a girl was endowed with by both of her parents, although the final decision of what to give to a daughter was made by father. However, Ukrainian dowry was a more complicated concept. Apart from the endowment appointed by the father from the common property, there was also a matrilineal inheritance, or so to call materizna from the word mate, mother, which was transferred exclusively from mother to daughter. It included the trousseau chest prepared by her and her mother, described above, and most important, it also included land. Women's right to own and inherit property and land was assured by the first statute of Lithuania. However, despite their relatively independent position of women in the 16th to 18th century, Orest Levitsky points out that this information concerns mostly women from the well-heeled and gentry classes, whereas little evidence exists regarding peasants because they did not go to court. Elaborating on the topic of matrilineal inheritance, Marina Hrimich asserts that the tradition of materizna as a means for a woman to get a plot of land as part of the dowry was relevant for the 18th century and among Cossacks, while in the 19th century it was not prohibited but was not common because of the peasants' impoverishment. But the exceptions were when a daughter was the only child or there were no brothers in the family. As this exception is the case in our tale, and also because some elements of tales do not change very promptly in response to social changes, I still use the term materizna in its entire meaning, so I applied it. And also, what is important is the position of old woman herself, because she is or she was widow, and it means she was widow who got remarried, and it influences her property rights because once the woman has an importance once she's tied to children, but once her husband dies, she remains with the property before the marriage or before the independent life of the children. And once she gets remarried, she is deprived of any of her former husband's property. And it means that she could take only her materizna, her endowment gained from her parents before marriage. So she loses her right for the land and for any other property. And this might serve as a cause, as a reason that she takes, not like takes care, but that she wants to get rid so much of another girl of old man daughter, because she's the direct inheritor of everything from him, whereas her daughter is not a direct inheritor, and for sure, being a mother, she wants to provide her with a decent dowry in order to gain a profitable spouse. And the points I mentioned above lead us to the very last point, to the reward. In both of the variants, when the girl meets the young woman who asks her about service, or the landlord, or anyone whom she encounters and who hires her, she gains rewards after accomplished tasks, and the reward she gains means nothing else but salary. Therefore, defining the nature of tasks and reward, we can see that in a social context, her job is not merely rewarded, but it is literally paid job. This becomes even clearer when we consider the material reward she gets, as talking with Alan Dunder's terms, luck liquidated. The nature of luck is very simple. When it goes to the peasantry, their property in the 19th century was quite fragile anyway, and gaining jewelry, necklace, clothing, and money and other goods make the girl in the tale a favorable spouse herself, who shouldn't wait for random matchmakers, but who can choose herself the spouse she wants. For sure, not also means that she gains another, it also means that she gains another social status, from a low heroine to a high heroine. And the very last point to be mentioned is the idea of the beauty that accompanies every female tale. And not only beauty, but yeah, beauty and loveliness, let's say. So Ben Holbeck relates the gifts the heroine gets to her sexual role. Meanwhile, Warren Roberts, describing the elements of some of Ukrainian variants, defined their reward as the girl becomes lovelier. So these variants can be seen in Rudchenko's collection. However, the description in the tale was used with a bit another meaning. So, quote from the tale, once she steps out from the right ear, she becomes as lovely as a princess. Before she had looked like a worker, like me, but then she became a princess. Such a description is intrinsic for Ukrainian culture to depict a rich and well-dressed girl. She looks like a princess not because of her physical beauty, but because of the good clothes and necklace she gained. Moreover, in other variants of the tale, after the reward, the dog at home starts to say that the old man's daughter is like a princess, whereas the old woman's daughter is like a bitch, which reaffirms a previous argument against physical reward. The girl's description right after gaining the reward emphasize the girl's loveliness, but her loveliness and beauty depend on other factors than physical features in this context. Rewarded clothes, necklace, and goods make her attractive in a marriage, in the meaning of marriage, while her physical traits have not changed at all. Such descriptions brings up a question of the meaning of beauty, which considered not physical traits only, but the whole appearance that reflected her social status and well-being too. Leading the discussion, talking about the beauty, one should bear in mind that the beauty concept was distant in the time of the tale, and by this I mean even not the matter of fashion or body trends. The difference I'm talking about is the role of beauty and its meaning. For example, Isabel Cardigos relates beauty in the tales to the capacity to be married, asserting that the ethical conflict of good and evil is facilitated by alteration between beauty and ugliness, where beauty regards marital status. Mentioned correlation between ethic issues and attraction can be seen both linguistically and semantically. In Ukrainian language, the term dobra, which means kind, means both kind as personal feature and good as quality. Oksana Kis, analyzing Ukrainian stereotype of femininity, points out that a beautiful woman also means and is equal to a kind and good woman, whereas ugly is equal to evil woman in a broad meaning, including being quarrelsome and grumpy. Therefore, she also said that beautiful and kind good are the definitions of the same nature in folklore, but with a change in priorities that depend on the occasion. And here we turn to another meaning of beauty, which is related to a life circle. Beauty in its pure sense played an essential role in communication of youth before marriage and influenced the popularity of a girl on evening gatherings and among the opposite sex in general. But the factors of a girl's popularity in a youth community lost its effectiveness in situation when it went to make a family, because the main emphasis was on her property and how decent her trousseau was. Also, being industrious and having a decent trousseau gives her a wider range of possibilities to get married than beauty itself. And obviously that rich girls which were deprived of a prominent beauty had broader possibilities to get married. So in some concluding remarks, to summarize, I should say that property matters and higher social position in the meaning of wealth that can facilitate gaining a profitable spouse serve as an aim of the heroine's journey. I confirm this idea with the origin of the task that the girl should accomplish and its outcomes. And apart from the social context of a patriarchal point of view on femininity and woman as she is, there are also customs and customary law that affects gender and that brings salary to a woman. Moreover, hard work served as the only fair way to own property and to gain legacy. Consequently, household tasks that the heroine should accomplish in the forest hut would have a social and economic background rather than the patriarchal vision on femininity only. They would affirm her right to own property and to inherit the legacy, as well as add to it. Describing beauty and love, the necessary badge and intrinsic features of femininity, I assert that the concept of beauty is wider than physical attractivity and includes personal features such as kindness, obedience, savvy, and so on, when it goes to marriage, and also the proper amount of trousseau. As one can see from the tale, there is an equal sequence of kind, good, rich, beautiful, which embodies the ideal image of a girl or fiancée. And in the tale, the girl is industrious, and which means she is good in a broader sense, kind and obedience from the beginning, and rich once she gets her reward, and consequently beautiful, as it was described in some of the variants as an outcome of her journey in relation to her prosperous looking clothes and necklace. All this not only increase her chances to get married, but allow her to choose a spouse herself, because now she is a desirable spouse for everybody. And the very last point to mention is that only in 2 variants, the girl is getting married in the end of the tale, and it never mentioned as a reward. It mostly mentioned as in both variants. It is described as something afterwards, like she came to visit her father and she was married again, and that's it. And that's it from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alina, for your presentation. Very interesting presentation. I'm sure the audience has questions. I see applause from some in the audience. If you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and unmute yourself, or type them in the chat, and Alina will take them from the chat. Thank you, Alina. Yelena?
Hi, thank you. Just to start this conversation, can you comment kind of in a little more details on how unique Ukrainian customary law was, and how was it different from, let's say, neighboring territories in the 19th century?
Thank you for your question. Ukrainian customary law, it was based on these Lithuanian statutes, and and it means also that let's say the same rules were applied in Lithuanian Commonwealth as well. But honestly, I'm not very much aware of customary law in other countries, and that's why I cannot compare. And moreover, let's say I don't know that much the context to make a relevant comparison and to evaluate or define anything in any other culture. I would just say that this idea of the right to inherit land and to own land, it was quite ideal for sure for Ukrainian women, but as I mentioned, that it depends very much on prosperity of the family, because in 19th century was having lots of plots, very small plots of land. It was almost impossible to give this land as a dowry to your daughter because you have lots of sons, and that's why it's like it make no sense. But if you have only daughter, then it happens for sure.
Thank you.
Alina, there are two questions in the chat. And the first one is, can you please comment on the situation that the visitor in the hut in the forest is a mare and not a stallion?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Indeed, Mare's head is quite an interesting figure, and indeed the most intriguing point that it is mare and not stallion, or just a horse, let's say. I can relate it a little bit somehow to legends about hidden treasures. And then like when people put a spell, let's say cast a spell over the treasure, they used to kill some animals, and sometimes it was Mare's head. Let's say it might be the full size animal or just the head. However, another point is that there is no such a creature, like let's say independent mythological creature of Mare's head in Ukrainian folklore. So we can see it exclusively in a fairy tale. And if we look at it from a psychoanalytical, let's say, point of view, which is sometimes applied by fairy tale studies, who concentrates on symbolical meaning, that it can actually represent for sure her dead mother, who, let's say, establish justice or like compensate what is going on, because she doesn't have mother and she has no possibility to prepare this decent trousseau. And then there is this mother figure who make this justice and who gives her trousseau and who make revenge over another evil girl, something like this.
We have two raised hands and more questions in the chat. And I think I saw Natalia's hand first. Go ahead, Natalia, and Maria, you will be after.
Thank you. Alina, I just wanted to compliment you on the very engaging approach to the study of wonder tales. I should follow your vocabulary. And personally, someone who's trained in anthropology, I appreciate this opportunity of going outside of the narrative itself and connecting the metaphor to the realities of the day. I just wanted to, in some ways, follow up on Yelena's comment. You probably are familiar with the scholarship of Christine Vorobets. She spent some time studying the community and family in post-emancipation period in Russia. And of course, because Russia has been an imperial state, many scholars who have Russia in title, in fact, have worked also with Ukrainian material. So for the comparative element, you might want to consult at least her work, but also there are others as well. A very simple question to you. I'm curious where is this work fits in the larger project you might be working on? Just that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Definitely, I need to have a look at the work that you mentioned. Maybe I can benefit from it, and about the larger scale. So this it's actually the topic of one of my articles for my PhD project, which is on gender issues in Ukrainian wonder tales. And so this is like part of it, let's say. But also the main point why I started to write this article was that I read the monography of Warren E. Roberts on this tale type, and I got very furious when I saw the list of Ukrainian variants in his book, because for sure, firstly, it was not completed, but he explained that it was difficult to reach any archives in Ukraine, but also because lots of them, like some of them, now this problem is solved, but before some of them you can find in Russian variants of tale, and some of them in Polish variants of tale, and consequently he made a conclusion about this subtype, let's say about this region, a wrong conclusion about this region, because the subtype he describes actually not dominant in Ukraine. And let's say I decided that I have to reestablish the justice.
Thank you.
Maria?
Thank you. Thank you, Alina, for a very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. You kind of suggest reading fairy tales through the prism of customary law. In a way, you try to rationalize this folkloric narrative, a tale. I want to clarify what happened with the other girl.
She was eaten by Mari's head. She was eaten by Mari's head, and in all variants, bones remains after her.
Yeah, so I want to ask, because I kind of have, I have problems when mythological narrative is read through concept of historian truth. I do believe that mythology and mythological thinking cannot be used to study history or law. I do believe that these two ways of thinking are very similar and correspond with each other, but at the same time, they establish different form of reality. And we can study contacts between them, but interpretation, folk through law, or studying history through folklore is kind of a problematic approach. It has a lot of pitfalls which could be taken into account. So my question is, how would you approach this fact that the other girl died through perspective of customary law? Do you see any effects of customary law on this part of fairy tale? Because from point of view, if we study these tales through semiotic epistemologies, it makes a lot of sense. But from customary law, it's a crime, right? So it cannot be performed in reality that parents just killed their daughter and nothing happened afterwards. So how would you interpret this part of the fairy tale? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pani Maria, for your question. And first of all, I want to clarify that I do not study history through folklore, but I find it fruitful to study folklore through history. And this is a little bit different directions. I don't mean that folklore can bring in something new into study of history, but let's say history and customary law, and that's why it is customary law. It is the social reality where people lived in. It, from my perspective, from my point of view, it certainly affects what is going on, or what was going on. Another point is that fairy tale or wonder tale or tales in general, they are not part of mythology. They are very separate from mythology. Let's say mostly also because when we talk about myth is something in a, so to speak, remote past, which doesn't change very much until it doesn't exist in a community which still tells and retells this myth. So Ukrainian is not that kind of community. And it means that folklore texts always adapt to the reality. And there is a simple example for it, that when we can see about tales about dragon slayer, for example, and firstly, it is serpent or snake or dragon whom he slays. Yeah, very simple. And then this figure of serpent is replaced by Tsar or by king, but actually the plot remains the same. And it means what? It means it just adopts to a new reality. And when we take some contemporary versions, for example, lately I encountered a very recent version of Tale Kotehoroshko, which was made in a political way and spread it in the internet, and which used Ukrainian politicians and general geopolitical situation. So these things, these realities, they are changing, and let's say text cannot remain isolated from social reality anyway, because if it is isolated, it just fades away. That's why it changes and adopts, and that's why I do think that customary law, let's say, can probably contribute it somehow from that point of view. And you very reasonably mentioned this semiotic approach, and talking about semiotic, for example, why I do think that there is some customary law, let's say, at least in this tale, because when we talk, even in modern or contemporary narratives or memes, which we see a metaphor, or we see a symbol of something, and we don't need a long explanation because we already know what it refers to, instead of long explanation. And the law of fairy tale, the basic fairy tale law, is that the fairy tale is very dry. It says only the most important things. So let's say if it is very dry, it will be strange to, let's say, to give a long explanation about, for example, if she's widow, and lots of, I don't know, lots of things that follows it. But if you say that she is widow, for example, you know all the connotation of this term. It is already implied there. You just used this term widow, and all the connotations, they are there already. Customary connotation, belief connotation, gender connotation, all the connotations, they are there already. And yes, now forwarding to your main question, let's say in case of death of the bad girl, I'm not sure we can interpret it from a customary law point of view directly, but let's say it's just kind of moral principle that the one who don't work, the one don't eat. If you don't eat, you die. Let's simplify it like this. At least I never encountered, and I never thought that someone can be killed for being lazy. Let's say I didn't think about this, but maybe it has something. Thank you very much. I have to think about this.
Yeah.
We have a question in the chat, and then Alex, your question, and we'll have to wrap up because we're running out of time. So the question from the chat is, are you aware of other folk tales which would describe the characteristic required for a good husband?
Required for a good husband?
Yes.
That's a great question. That's a great question, because at least, let's say, that fairy tales or wonder tales I know, they have, this is the point, that they have contrast between female traits and what is demanded from female to be a proper female, to represent this femininity, and between male. There is Joanna Jorgensen, she described actually this idea of ideal husband or male representation. There is a representation of a proper masculinity in fairy tales, and she says that an interesting point is that there are no actually adjectives of good man. Let's say we always see it from deeds, so that the hero or the husband, like this male figure, is always represented through deeds. So let's say that he is a prosperous spouse, for example, and let's say this is already enough. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Alex, it's your turn.
Thank you. Thank you, Alina, for this rich and interesting presentation. I really liked your interpretation of this tale and mastery of integration of sociologic, folkloric, literary, and historical approaches. But my question relates to what extent what you were presenting, this sort of familial sociology as reflected in the folklore and in this tale, is unique / different, and therefore unusual probably from the actual status of affairs. Was this independence of Ukrainian women something rare in the reality? Because we know about the right to several properties in the Ukrainian society. That is when the husband and wife were independent from one another in terms of property ownership. So my question is, what aspects, new aspects that are not covered by scholars of sociology are evident in this tale that you discussed today? And maybe to make my question more general, your research is very well situated on the border between sociology and folklore studies, or even maybe literary studies. So how do these 2 or 3 fields complement each other in your research? Do you define yourself as a sociologist of literary studies, or of literature, folklore, or what's your own academic self identification? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure that, at least I don't see it, I'm not sure that my interpretation of the tale or the tale itself contributes something new to history or study of sociology, but there is one important moment there is this, that marriage is not required. I mean, it is implemented, yeah, but what is distinct is that we don't see a direct search for a husband, or let's say husband as a direct way. It is implemented because that was the situation in society, but the main way, the main direction was prosperity, money, property at a first place, and this is quite unique. However, I'm not very much aware with all the local versions in Europe, for example, so I'm not sure, I don't know how they are interpreted in Europe as well, but what I can say that let's say this Ukrainian fairy tale is somehow different from these usual or common female tales when the woman is beautiful and then she is just rescued by someone, or yeah, that she has this direct way from unmarital status to marital status. In here we see something another. Let's say we see you earn, you gain, and that's it. So it's a little bit another perspective, but yeah, about sociology, I'm not sure I or this tale, we contribute something there. And answering to your second question, I do consider myself as a pure folklorist. So it just happens that in some research you can touch upon some other fields, and I believe it only enrich our research. It gives a broader vision on the problem. Yeah, I would like to emphasize that I don't consider myself as in literature study as well, because folklore is not literature, it is something very different. And yeah, so I consider myself as folklorist.
We have many comments in the chat, and I apologize, we won't be able to take them. I will pass them to Alina, so she will be able to see them and connect with you if necessary. But Alina, there is one more hand raised. Are you able to take another question?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
have it.
Marina Demiduk, прошу.
Thank you. I think it's not a question, but a comment. I'm also from Ukraine, and in my field work in 2007 and 2008, I collected a few variants of this story, and in my collection, the mythological sound of the text was erased from the story. For example, the girl doesn't go to the forest, but she receives a reward from the shepherd in which she served. And also very interesting for me was the ending. So in this ending, in Modern Tales, grandmother recognizes physical and moral advantages of grandfather's daughter, and she shames her own daughter and sent her away. So the unkind girl doesn't die; she just sent away.
Thank you very much. It is. It was collected just, let's say, recently, yeah, as far as I understand.
Yes, it was collected recently, 2007 and 2009. It was in Podillia region and Transcarpathian region. And when I asked a woman that tell me this story, why you tell this story, and when do you have when she tells that tale came from life. In life we have kind girl, and in life we have unkind. So the same in tales, like in life.
It's a great interpretation from your interlocutor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Alina, once again, and thank you to everyone in the audience for your active participation, for your questions and comments. And we hope to see you again at our next Folklore Lunch series. And yeah, a round of applause for Alina. She definitely deserves it. Thank you. And if you're celebrating Easter, happy Easter.